Good morning and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. Look at that. It is definitely cold outside and cold in here. So a hot coffee is in order. I hope you're having a great day. I'm going to touch on the subject here. I'm going to try and explore it fully from the perspective of a woken mind, a prepared mind, right? A red-pilled mind. Take the red pill, which is take the truth and wake up. Right? It's such a great idea. It's been around a long time. I took a red pill back in the late 80s, having to do with the Federal Reserve System. Now, I had heard of Bigfoot, I had heard of UFOs, I heard of the JFK assassination being a conspiracy, right? But I didn't really understand that it affects the whole world, the real world, until 1989, when I had that discussion with Fred Newsom, God rest his soul. Oh, by the way, at the end of this video, I'm probably going to have a special presentation, and I'll explain it then, what I'll continue to talk about. Anyways, back to the red pill. Waking up. This is quite an interesting little story I have here from Summit.News. And it has to do with the red pill. And it has to do with what we need to do about it. So, let's kind of get into it. This has to do with former President Barack Hussein Barry-Soetoro Obama, one of the most interesting characters of our time. I didn't say likable. I do not like him. But he is an interesting character. I think he is a Manchurian candidate, and he's happy being that. He has a sense of power and activism, and he's done very well for himself, has he not? For himself. Not for the country, but for himself. Anyways, he says, wokeness is not activism. And he's right. He criticizes, interestingly, not you, not me, not preppers, not Republican, but it seems like he's criticizing millennial youth and Gen Z youth. And I'll talk about it real quick and then see where we go from there. Quote, this idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. I can almost say it with his tone. Many have criticized woke culture as a new form of Puritanism. However, a surprising development occurred Tuesday when former President Obama slated the idea as politically naive, saying that people need to, quote, get over that quickly. I'm going to give you a couple more little quotes from him, and that'll be it. And then we'll talk about what we need to talk about as red-pilled preppers. Quote, the world is messy. There are ambiguities. People who do really good stuff have flaws. One danger I see among young people, particularly on college campuses. Remember, that is a small sector of the country. I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is a sense sometimes the way of me making a change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people, and that's enough. Then he poked at woke keyboard warriors, like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or use the wrong verb or then, I can sit back and feel good about myself. You see how woke I was? I called you out. He mocked, right? Get on TV, watch my show, watch Grownish. You know, that's not activism. That's not bringing about change, he added sardonically. Right? If all you're doing is casting stones, you know, you're probably not going to get that far. That's easy to do. Well, interesting, Barack Obama is telling the truth. Or at least he's stating a fact. They're not really activists. They're just smartasses, but it's giving them a sense of accomplishment. I corrected that guy. But he's right about a couple of things. It's not activism. What they're doing is easy, but isn't that what millennial socialists and Gen Z socialists want? They want the easy path. They want recognition. They want a paycheck for doing something they think was important. Right. He's criticizing him. You're not a real activist. In other words, you might assume that he is saying, do more than that. You need to become active, right? Activism uses the word active, meaning movement, moving, causing action, kinetic energy, right? Movement, activism. Now, from Barack Hussein Obama's presidential chair, he was not an activist. All he is a protagonist, an administrator who tells other people what to do so they are active. He's taking the same role. He's not doing anything. Obama's not marching. Obama's not collecting signatures. Obama's not out standing on an apple crate shouting and yelling. He's sitting back and doing nothing and wanting credit for it and say, see what I'm doing? I'm active. Well, he's more like a field marshal who's trying to marshal or activate his troops. He wants these kids to do more. He wants them to become more active. Right? Being keyboard warrior isn't enough. Anyone can do that. That's easy. I think what is happening is they've come to the end in the left to what power they're developing with these younger folks. The activists that are active, the Antifa types, they're out there. They're blocking traffic. They're waving banners. They're shouting and screaming at old ladies trying to cross the street. You know, they're doing all they can. Some are violent, some are not. But that's it. They got what they're going to get out of these youth. Wow. They got what they're going to get, but he's asking for more. Now, this idea of them being woke, what are they woke to? Right? Are they woke because they're hip to corporate greed and crony capitalism? And so they're woke, they're red-pilled, right? But they're believing, they're believing a story that's putting them back to sleep, right? The world is messy, there are ambiguities. Right, Obama, right? Really good, or people who do really good stuff have flaws. Yeah, we're all imperfect. What is fascinating here, though, is that these young people think they're pure and therefore valuable, and they're never compromised, right? What's fascinating is that the socialist system, the communist system, is completely compromised fundamentally in its ideology and at its dogma and its core. Through history, there are examples of exactly how it fails. In fact, every example is one of failure. We just haven't seen China fall all the way yet. But this idea that because they see a flawed capitalist model being enacted on, it's not true capitalism. But they see it as that so that they can then denigrate capitalism or freedom, as it were. And they think that the crony manipulated capitalism we have is capitalism, therefore we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Being woke, being red-pilled, even if they understood, yeah, it's crony capitalism, and even if they understood, well, socialism has failed, but we'll get it right this time, right? It comes down to fundamental belief systems. I see our system as broke, but I don't blame capitalism. I see socialism as fundamentally broke, and I don't blame the people, I blame the ideology, because that political ideology is prone to fail because of humans. It can't change human behavior. Over here on the capitalism side, human behavior wants freedom, and it thrives on freedom, but as soon as you introduce the cronyistic, manipulative angles, it compromises it and brings it down. See, anything that isn't good brings the system down. It doesn't mean it won't benefit a few for a while, like the super rich. And under socialism, the people gain other wealth that they acquire, steal from others. So it works for a little while, but ultimately they fail. You know, being free doesn't fail people. It holds them responsible. Anyways, it's interesting that Barack wants to put a few facts out there, and they're trying to correct their students, right? But let's talk about being red-pilled. Let's talk about woke, right? Wokeness, waking up. we're at an interesting time in history where everyone is waking up to a different degree to what really is happening. Whether or not you're ideologically a socialist because of indoctrination or someone who likes freedom because of that indoctrination. Right? Someone had taken me as a young child and just browbeat into me that, being white and male was bad and that being a communist is good and it's the only way to make things fair. I'm sure I would be a communist if someone had beaten that into me. But I was taught that America is great and freedom's great, and I believed it. And I can see how it works and how it has worked through time. But we're all waking up, whether communist or libertarian, we're waking up. We're all becoming red-pilled slowly. Some more than others, some earlier than others, some at faster rates than others. But we're all getting to the point where we're awake. What does that mean? We're awake, we're aware, we're informed of certain things. Right? What does that lead to, though? Obama is calling for activism. So this isn't about being red-pilled. That's already happening now. Those players and pieces have been set in motion. Now we're going to look at the term activism. I think this is really where the next phase lies, where it goes to. Activism, becoming active, participating, getting onto the board. This call for activism. It should be with us as libertarians as much as it is for social communists. We need to get more active. And we have to do that, I believe, first and foremost in our own lives. Active in our mind so that our body is active. Actively pursuing and studying information. And not just saying, yeah, I know, and then going back and getting to sleep and, hitting the bong pipe like these kids. They think they're woke, they correct a few people on a keyboard, slap off a few insults, and then they go back to their mother's basement and then figure they're good. Right. I'm not going to tell them to wake up and get moving. I don't want them moving. I like them being apathetic, but I think we need to be active over here. Once again, our minds, then our bodies, and we need to get prepared. The reason prepping is activism. Not in the usual sense of social activism, but personal activism. Taking responsibility for ourselves as part of being free. It's part of being a libertarian. Because it's accepting responsibility for ourselves in all cases, right? So we need food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. We need a plan, right? And we need to see what's going on in the world. We need to be red-pilled with the world so we can be active in our own life. The plan is a big part of that, an understanding, woken to the reality of human behavior, which we are. We understand the consequences, or we need to understand the consequences of human behavior. And I'm constantly learning myself. I don't know everything. And I just share ideas with you guys, and I want you to think. Sometimes I take the goofy side of things just to cause, right, the conversation to happen. But it's important to note that we need to be active. We need to take steps. We need to be prepared. We need to be responsible for ourselves. Over here, on the communist side, they are not responsible for themselves. You see, the government is responsible for them. They're activists, but only in their heads, except for the ones that are out there. They are stalling in a way, right? There's only so many of them and only so far they can go before they have to get violent to take their activism to the next step. They only learn as far as they have to get social recognition or to feel good about themselves. But they don't take into account the real world. They're not really red-pilled. They're not really woke to what the real world is. Because when they're hungry, they go to the fridge and mama's put food in there. Right? And when they want to go somewhere, daddy gives them a $20 bill or a $100 bill and says, have a good weekend. Right? They're just angry they're not getting everything that the old rich people have. Well, they haven't put in the time, but they've been told they shouldn't have to. So they're living in a false reality. But they believe they're woke, right? They can criticize someone else's speech or choice of words, the way they look, they can pick on them. Hell, I can do that, and I'm not even really good at it. Really being red-pilled, really being woke, is understanding our fundamental thinking. Having an opinion is not being woke, right? Being red-pilled, being woken up to reality, is to understand what's going on out there and to see into the future by looking into the past and seeing what works, what fundamentally works for personal success, freedom, right? Spiritual success and freedom. What works for communities, states, and the nation, and indeed the world? What system works? What parts of it work and what don't? And then understanding the parts that don't work, why? Why is it that socialism fails? Is it the ideology of the system, or is it human nature? It's my opinion, it's human nature that causes a communist idea to fail, because there's no incentive to do better. And humans, in reality, are incentivized by the prospect of being comfortable, having what we need, being able to get more of what we want, and to do things other than being a good little communist worker, right? We want to do well. We want the opportunity to do well. So understanding human nature, you can see how freedom encourages people to work harder. But there's also the idea that we're responsible for ourselves. And so as red-pilled, libertarian, constitutional-minded, God-fearing, red-blooded Americans, this is where we need to be. So we have to understand that, but understand the flawed nature of ourselves and understand the flawed ideology and flawed nature of these people over here who have accepted this dogma of communism. And that rather than promote freedom in their minds, it promotes slavery to them, subservience to another entity like government, which is itself flawed. This is what we've got. This is where we're at. You can think you're red-pilled, or you can be red-pilled. You can think you're an activist, or you can be a real activist. So in your own life, you get prepared, all the stuff you need. Then you can talk to friends. Then you can talk to family. Then you can talk to coworkers if you dare to do any of that, right? And I'm not challenging anyone. I know we're all different, and we all have different levels of comfort. And we also have different situations. Your family, friends, and coworkers may all be a bunch of idiots or communists or Democrats or whatever, and you don't feel comfortable talking about it to them. It's part of your operational security plan just to be quiet. But you can be an activist if you choose to be. But believe me, when shit hits the fan, you will be an activist in the physical sense, right? The physical sense. Because now you may not have power, water, food, government-maintained peace. Let's use that phrase, huh? You may not have those, and so you're responsible for yourself. But as a freedom-minded person, as a red-pilled human being, you understand, well, there's nothing out there. We have ultimate freedom. There is no government or power or food. I have absolute freedom to exist. Except there are other people out here who I have to interact with, and I have to decide and understand for myself. I'm responsible for me as much as they are for them. You become active in all areas. You're actively responsible for food, water. You're actively responsible for maintaining your shelter, right? Being clothed. You can't get mad and blame other people. It's all on you. You have to be active. Mentally, you have to be active physically for your self-defense, for getting firewood, for fetching water, doing things the hard way. That is the price of ultimate independent individual freedom, is now you have to take on and be your own supply chain and provider for everything. Shit, it's the fan is a giant red suppository. And if you're not, if you haven't taken the red pill, you're going to take the suppository. And I think you all know what I mean by that. You can take the red pill and wake up and realize you're responsible. Or you can take it in the chute and it's going to hurt a lot worse, and it's not going to be a pleasant experience. Being woke to reality. Whether you're a commie or not, being woke to the reality of reality, not to the perception of reality or the belief of reality or the claim to purity and puritanical righteousness as a communist, they're going to have a hard time, folks. So this idea that when shit hits the fan, right, they're all going to be on top of us. No, it's going to be just their active activists. And we do have a problem with them. But for the most part, being woke, yeah, Obama's right. They think they're woke, and they're not. They don't really see over here that the system is coming down, that there's a banking problem, that there's a market problem, that there's an economic problem, that there's a political problem that can't be solved by standing on a soapbox and preaching. Right? I'm not preaching a fix. I'm saying we need to get ready. We need to be prepared. Right? I'm not saying taxing those rich people is going to fix our problems. That won't fix shit. Right? I'm not saying cutting taxes is going to fix our problems on a national level. No, it won't fix anything. It'll just move money around. Right? Regulating and taxing, that doesn't fix anything. What fixes things is activism in our own lives, fixing ourselves, preparing our own personal environment, and being responsible for ourselves is what fixes everything. Unfortunately, there's a lot of pain between here and there. I want to talk a little bit about shit hitting the fan. People say it can't happen, it won't happen, it hasn't happened. Yet we have some very recent historical examples, and I'm not talking about Bosnia, where there was a civil war. Let's look at an even bigger example, a more important example, one that people in America really have no clue ever happened. They call it the fall of the Soviet Union. That's right, in the early 90s, the Soviet Union, a nuclear superpower, a nuclear communist superpower, failed. Their monetary system, their social system, their political system, it failed. It fell on its face. That means their currency was no good. Their means of production was in question, their distribution systems, everything. That was shit hitting the fan. Now, what is wonderful about that, besides the Berlin Wall coming down, what is wonderful is there was no nuclear war as a result. There was no nuclear meltdown of power plants as a result of that happening. As a result of the Soviet Union failing, there was not open civil war in every city and in every province or state or republic. Right? It was a fairly calm changeover to what they have now. And it was painful. It was difficult. People died. There was starvation. There was no medicine. There was lack of goods available. You couldn't just go buy money with stuff you didn't have. Right? Their money, what's it worth? What's a ruble worth in a country that just had its governmental system and everything collapse? That can happen here just as easily because we don't have a free system. We have a manipulated system just like the Soviet Union did. Not the same type of system, but it's similar in that it's manipulated and controlled and it benefits just a few and it doesn't have freedom as its core. Now we have compulsory mandates, just like the Soviet Union had compulsory mandates. But the Soviet Union did fail. It was shit hitting the fan. And like I said, fortunately, didn't result in World War III, didn't result in an attack. It was more introspective. They turned in on themselves and said, how do we get out of this? Ukraine, similarly, has had problems continuing since then because the West is involved in it. But they, right, their system, their currency, their government, nothing but problems, shit hitting the fan. So what I have prescribed or said is and predicted is happening to our country. It's a failure of the political system and the economic system and the monetary system. Those same things that happened to the Soviet Union are happening now. Everything was fine. In fact, in the 80s, the Soviet Union was marching fast and marching hard, and world communism and the threat of nuclear annihilation in my childhood, right, played out. Everything looked fine, and then all of a sudden, in just a matter of a year, a couple of months, and then days, and then hours, it was just announced, poof, Not good. It's over. It's done. We've got to change the system in the Soviet Union. The same thing can happen to the United States, and the same thing can happen to China. It's just, what does the government do to its people? That is, those with power and machinery and some resources. Do they take that power and machinery and human resources and other military hardware and go attack the people to try and maintain control? The Soviet Union didn't do that to any vast extent. And by vast, I mean over the whole country. China, will it do that? The United States, will it do that? The question, is it possible? Right? Being an activist as a communist or being an activist as a libertarian hasn't fixed our government or changed the system. It's continued down the path that the people in charge have chosen, which is crony capitalism, aka corporatism, aka globalism, aka fascism. Right? It's the merger of government and business to benefit each other, leaving the people out of the equation. Right? We all have our opinions on what to call it, but what it's doing to me is something that we've woken up to. Same with the communists over here. They've woken up to what the system really is. But as a prepper, you're an activist. Because you're actively participating and starting at the bottom, the way the Russians did, or the Soviets. No, they're Russians, because the Soviet Union went away and they became Russians again. Or Georgians or Chechens or whatever. Okay. You're an activist, but you have to start with yourself. Right? How can someone who is corrupt teach good spirituality practices to others? Right? We have to be activists and be prepared before we can teach others to be prepared. We have to teach ourselves to be activists in our own life and responsible in our own life and plan for our own life before others can follow, before others can learn and teach, etc. Right? Calling for people to become activists is one thing, but doing it's another. And we need to be prepared because this is coming. It is coming. And Obama, what's he doing? He's saying, hey, you guys, you're not activists. You just think you are. Now they're starting to see the consequence of teaching these kids that you can just shoot your mouth off and that's enough. And that complaining is enough, right? They've exhausted, as far as I'm concerned, over here on the social communist side. They've exhausted. They know who is on their side and what they get to fight with. Right? Their system didn't produce 100 million communists for them. But sadly, and frighteningly, they could have enough to cause troubles. They could. I'm relying on their apathy to allow us, as woke people who understand libertarianism and how a human society can truly exist and flourish, and allow people to move from poor to middle class to rich with freedom, without ceilings put in artificially by people controlling the systems. You know, it takes integrity. It takes honesty, and it takes freedom in order to truly have a prosperous society. And it's hard to get rid of all the corruption and get rid of immoral people, right? Because they're always going to put themselves in places to benefit themselves in a way that hurt others. I just want to be free. I want other people to be free. But enough of me. Anyways, woke. Are you red-pilled? Are you woke up? Are you truly seeing what's out there? Do you know what's coming? Do you know why it's happened? And do you see where we can go afterwards? Do you see the roadblocks or the impediments that can be put in the way by groups of people over here or governments? Right? By selfish factors? Right? We can see all of that stuff. What can you do about it, though? Me taking a placard with 100 guys who look and are built just like me and standing in a freeway shouting at people and stopping traffic is not going to change anything. That's activism. I'm active. We're active. But it's not going to fix the problem, because the problem is much bigger at this stage than any small amount of activism can do. That's why these little communist activists, they go after other people down on their level. But they're not changing the structure, the government, what is up here. And so I'm now going to beat a dead horse if I continue along this line, this vein. And I'm going to now move into another discussion. If at any time you don't like the discussion, I don't blame you for leaving, because this is going to be about some criticism that I read, and I want to talk about it just a little bit. It has to do with something similar to what Obama brought up, and I thought I would mention it at the end of this video. Some people have criticized me saying, John, you're not a good Christian if you take the Lord's name in vain or if you cuss. You're not a good Christian. How can anyone believe anything you say if, right? And it's very interesting. Once again, whether they're a good person or not, I don't know. But they're sitting on their end. They're sitting on your end of the computer and thinking from a rather interesting point of view that I am wrong or bad, right? That my salvation is dependent upon their approval. Right? My spirituality, my belief and faith in the Almighty, and my salvation for my sins, the atonement for my sins, isn't for anyone else to decide. Right? I am 49 years old. I'm doing the best that I can. I try really hard to be a good person. I really do. And to hear somebody criticize me or castigate, right? Well, on the one hand, I accept the criticism humbly, but I understand already that I'm an imperfect being. But to receive a criticism from another imperfect being along the lines of something as personal as spirituality or religious fervor is kind of ridiculous. Is that person without sin that wants to criticize me? No, they're not, right? There's no perfection. I'm sorry. You don't get to criticize me because I've said something. I don't follow you around and show you and point out how you're wrong all the time. I don't speak from a perspective of pious indignation and righteousness towards anyone with regards to spirituality. That's a very personal choice. That's why I tend not to talk about it too much on here, right? But I like to ask questions. Would God, would Jesus, would the Virgin Mary, would anyone in any spiritual hierarchical situation, would they rather know that I have a good heart and I'm a good person? Or would they rather hear me say flowery words but actually be a rotten person who doesn't care about others, who is truly, a sinner in all ways that they can? I often say a good person, you can tell, not because they're a perfect person, right? But because they try and do the right thing even when no one's looking, right? Even when no one's looking. So people that want to offer advice, I understand that. John, stop cussing so much. John, stop drinking. Stop smoking. Stop being a sinner. Whatever. Right? Even in the New Testament, let him who is cast or without sin cast the first stone, right? You're casting stones at me by telling me I'm not as good a Christian as I say. I'm not claiming to be a great Christian. I'm claiming to be what I am and doing the best that I can. Don't claim that my soul is in peril because I've used a bad word. Who are you to decide whether or not the Almighty has accepted, right, my faith or my belief or what I've done? It's ridiculous. Once again, we have to start with ourselves. We can help others, and I do appreciate people who genuinely want to help me. But some people like to judge, just like old Obama said, right? They need to get over that quickly, right? You think you're woke and you're saved and therefore you're perfect? Well, how long does forgiveness last from God? Does it last only 1 second? Or when you forgive me for all times as God, right? Is my belief good enough to last a lifetime, a human lifetime? I think so. So even though I continue to make mistakes and I'm not perfect, right? Who is anyone else to decide or to criticize? Especially if they themselves aren't perfect in every sense of the word. And I know a lot of people really do care. But sometimes I read these things and I'm thinking that is somebody who really thinks that they know better, who really believes that they have a handle, right, on what it takes to get to heaven. Right? It's incredible though. It's not active. You're not helping me actively. Right? How can someone help me actively? Right? You have to be involved in my life. And I don't want too many people involved in my life. I have to see, by example, other people behaving in good ways. And when I look out at the world, I don't see a whole lot of it. When I look over here at the little communist group, I don't see any of it. I see a lot of pious, secular idealism and ideology that is destructive to those individuals and everyone they're affecting and touching, which is why I want to stay away from them. And I do have really good people in my life. And I have very intelligent people and very spiritual people in my life. And I have in my life my faith. And I touch on it occasionally. But I am not preaching to anybody to get saved. I'm not preaching to anybody how to do it. I'm not preaching to anybody that they're doing enough. I'm telling you, we're responsible for ourselves. That is freedom. And putting social spiritual pressure on somebody. You're cussing too much. You drink too much alcohol and you smoke too much tobacco. What are you proving? Right? What are you fixing? And I really do appreciate and value that people want to help me. But you can't help me if you don't even understand who I am or where I've been, where I'm truly at in my spiritual life. Right? You know, but what your criticisms did do, though, is cause me to reflect on it. And interestingly, I found this wokeness thing to be of value to talk about for both prepping and then again this message here at the end of the video. We're going into the weekend, and I'm really glad, right, that I'm able to do this and get this out here. It matters for everything, right? Accepting responsibility for ourselves is everything in our life. Right? But I wanted to, because I don't understand the people that are criticizing me, whether they're genuine or whether they're just being pious, whether they're like the ones Obama refers to that just want to feel good about themselves, or if you're truly concerned about me. Right? Thank you if you are. And if you are one of these pious people, you don't have to help me. I don't want your help. Because if you're a pious, self-righteous do-gooder, anything you have to say to me is tainted by your own inadequacies. In other words, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And I never claim to be perfect. I try and be right or correct about understanding and predictions and right course of action, but I'm not perfect. That's why I also tell everyone, you are the expert in your world, right? That 10-mile radius around you, your job, your life, who's in your neighborhood, how to get prepared. You are the expert in your world. And that includes matters spiritual. But to take your world and your upbringing and your experiences and your knowledge and then try to put it on top of me is not a good move, right? I'm pretty level-headed, and so if I wasn't, I might take it as an insult, right? And instead, I kind of examined it. You know, why is this person saying these things? You know, are they really going to help me by criticizing me? I've had people congratulate me on being such a fine, moral and Christian type person. So, oh, you're a stellar example, and I don't buy that any more than I'm a terrible example. I appreciate the compliment for what it is, but I think I could be a lot better person morally. I think there's a lot of room to grow, right? And examples of that are cussing and drinking and smoking, but I don't do any of those things. Believe me, I don't do any of those things to an extreme, right? Meaning they dominate my life. I don't smoke pot, right? I don't drink excessively. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't smoke and chain smoke. I don't take things to an excess. Everything in my life, I try and take at what I would call everything in moderation, right? Everything in moderation. About the only thing I do excessively is think, right? And even that has a negative consequence. It has a very positive impact, but it also has a negative impact. So I need a lot more balance in that. I think we all need balance in our lives, but we do our very best, and I hope and I pray that everybody does their very best with everything. Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. I hope everybody is spiritually good with themselves, understanding and believing that they're doing the best that they can with the experiences and their life as they have. You know, I don't want to just go after people and say, you know, just leave me the fuck alone. I don't need to hear your shit, because I know some people are genuine and concerned, right? But other people really are pious numbskulls, and I've run into them on the street and in my life, right? They're ridiculous, right? If I held a mirror up to them, they'd crack it with all of their ridiculous failures. But, you know, it's not for me to judge them. That's for them to fix themselves, right? Anyways, I know I've prattled on quite a bit here, and I really do want to thank everybody for all of the effort you give and for everything you're doing, for all of your prayers for yourself, your family, and the world. I want to thank everybody for the good thoughts that come my way and the gratefulness that I've been shown for doing what I do. And I'm grateful for the comfort and the physical support in terms of sponsoring the show, watching the videos, sharing them with others to help yourself, to help others, and it also helps me. So it's a positive thing all the way around, and it's done through free will. None of it's compulsory. So once again, we're free agents over here. We're not being compulsory under a communist system. So I'm engaging in a free market, free human being enterprise with you guys, discussing what's really going on and what it takes to be red-pilled and awake, to be truly woken. I'm practicing it with you. And because you're still here, because you're still with the channel, and some of you have been from the very beginning, you're practicing with me and demonstrating how successful freedom can be. Right? Now, yes, of course, YouTube is holding me down and holding us back, this movement of freedom and thinking, including the freedom to spiritually be who you are and not accept someone else's political dogma, which is overarching and reaching into things other than just politics. It's reaching into social and then also our spiritual lives, right? Telling us what is right and wrong morally, what we have to accept, and using guilt and shame and other forms of punishment to get us to accept their notions. We are at this channel an example of how liberty and freedom can work. Free choice, free market, free thought, right? Even though we're imperfect, me, you, everybody, right? We're all imperfect. We're still demonstrating how this can work in a positive fashion. But we all have to accept responsibility for ourselves and then want to help ourselves and others and then be active. Thank you, Mr. Obama. We have to be active in our lives and actually take the correct actions, right? For all things, for all things. Anyways, as I said, I've prattled on quite a bit, and I think I'm going to end this video for now. And thank you very much on Patreon especially, but everyone for watching and sharing these videos. Right? I try and talk about very difficult subjects because life is difficult, right? It's not all about candy and bullets, right? I'll leave that to others. I want to talk about things that are difficult, right? Politics, race, social constructs, prepping, what we need to do, how we need to think, what actions we're going to be forced into dealing with, right? It's things like self-defense. It's not controversial to talk about making a meal. It's controversial about talking about how to keep other people from stealing your meal. And it's controversial to talk about how race relations and social interactions are going to be. And it is difficult to talk about things spiritual or religious because a lot of people don't want to hear it. They've got their own opinions, and that's great. So I really stay away from that. Not because it's not important, but because it is so personal. One's religious beliefs and their acceptance, right? Imagine somebody with a weak mental constitution who thinks they're doing a good job spiritually, and then someone condemns them and says, no, you're bad, you're doing it wrong. And that can bring that person down. That can hurt them. I don't want to do that to anybody, and I don't want anyone else doing it to others and bringing down their spiritual progression, their beliefs in God, and having them condemned the way atheists attack Christians or anyone who has a religious bone in their body. That's wrong. Likewise, atheists, you want to be an atheist? Fine, have at it. I'm not going to tear them down because they're just going to bone up, No, damn it, I believe this. Well, okay, then believe it. It's up to you, right? If you want to become religious, you know where to find them. You just go to that place, that building with the cross on top, and you'll be fine, right? So, anyways, I want everyone to have a great day, a great evening. But remember, chance favors the prepared mind is yours. Semper Fi means always faithful. Right? It's not just for the Marines, but we tend to use it, right? And Godspeed to all, meaning best wishes and fair traveling, right? From west to east to west, right? Wherever you're traveling, fair travelings, Godspeed to you. I'll talk to you soon.